One of my goals with this video was to make something short and sweet. Looking at this timeline, it looks like I failed that goal. Howdy guys, I'm Aiden of Blue Couch Productions, and welcome to a brand new series on the Aiden Archive channel where I break down my most recent video. Usually, when I'm done editing, I just throw away all the footage. I'll keep a backup of the video, but all the timeline and the gameplay stuff, I just don't need it anymore, and it takes up a lot of space, so I get rid of it. But I figured, hey, why not record sort of a breakdown where I go over all the key moments of the video and hopefully inspire some people to try out video editing because it can be very fun. It can also be very frustrating where I spent a lot of time on shit that I wish I knew how to do a lot sooner. So hopefully it'll be helpful too. But without any further ado, let's just go ahead and hop into it. This video might be a little long. I'm sorry. It's not going to be like edited or scripted or anything. We're just going how I see fit, what I decide to include, not to include, all that fun stuff. So yeah, let's go ahead and hop into it. We start first with the new and improved Blue Couch intro, which is only new and improved in that I changed out the logo. You'll notice on like some of the very early Blue Couch Productions videos that had this similar style intro, the text is different. I had to remake it because I lost the original one. Much more happy with this one. But basically what we have here is a little transition called an oval iris. And the reason it works is because it's feathered. So you can see it's a little blurry around the edges. That just makes it look a little nicer. I got that from MKBHD back in the day. Like every intro he did had an oval iris going into the footage that was around 15 frames long. If you're ever wondering, Aiden, how long should my video transitions be? 15 frames, like 9 out of 10 times. Anything lower moves too quick, and most times anything longer is too long. The only exception is a couple of transitions will look slightly better at 30 frames, depending, like the more involved ones. But for simple ones like irises or edge wipes or whatever, 15 frames. If you find that you need just a bit more time, go 30. But other than that, leave it alone. And if you can, like, try to include any sort of feathering just to sort of make it look a little bit cleaner. That's always something I try to do. Anyway, what we have here essentially is a bunch of Cuphead gameplay clips that are matched to the music. The track I have here is Floral Fury, which is used in the Cadney Carnation boss fight, and it kind of creates a problem later on, but we'll talk about that later. And then what we have here is me showing up on screen, and I tried to match it to the edge wipe, so you can see as the line goes down, I sort of pop up, and then the audio mutes a little bit as I start talking, so it kind of works out in that sort of way. This right here was Zach's idea. I'm talking about Fleischer era animation and run and gun platforming, and Zach wanted some visuals to it. So we have just a bit of keyframing for Betty Boop, then some run and gun gameplay of Contra, and then a transition that I've really been liking a lot is this Mr. Alex Tech Ultimate Spin. This is free, by the way. Just search up Mr. Alex Tech and you can find this transition. But it's really good at combining things. So you have two images here, but then it kind of swirls. And I have it turn into this Geico Cuphead image. I did not make this, by the way. This is a real commercial. Geico did one in Portal and Cuphead for some reason, and they're very bizarre and very funny. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw a little shout out in there. It's also a fun little thing where it's like, what do you get when you combine Fleischer animation and run and gun? Car insurance. Haha, bazinga. Okay, let's talk a little bit briefly about how the on-camera stuff worked. So this is a green screen, obviously. And the tough part about doing green screen footage is creating depth, making you stand out a bit from the background. So there was a couple of ways I did this. We'll start with me first. 3D keyer is sort of DaVinci Resolve's chroma keyer. You kind of draw a line on all the green parts. In fact, if we turn that off, this is sort of what it looked like in real life. There's my little Elgato green screen. You want to try to have it evenly lit. You can see there was a bit of a shadow here because I wasn't standing far enough from it, but I was able to hide it pretty well. Turning up D-spill usually helps a lot. And then what I did here, which I think makes way more of a difference, is I added a drop shadow So if you zoom in, you see this little shadow right here on my shoulder. Kind of helps me stand out a little bit more from the background, which is nice. And then the footage also has some effects on it. I don't know if you noticed this, but you can see I added some scan lines all throughout the image. And I also added a Gaussian blur so that it kind of replicates that old TV effect. And then the challenge for this video is anytime I'm on camera, you know, the gameplay has this Gaussian blur scan line. But when I'm not on camera, there's no effects. There's no effects added to the gameplay here. There's no scan line. There's no blur. There's no nothing. So the entire video is full of these transitions where you'll have this clip, for instance, of me fighting these frogs. And then you'll go forward, and then a little blur dissolve transition, and then bam. It's the same clip, but now with the scan lines and the blur and the drop shadow and stuff. So, yeah, just a simple little thing. Try to change up your transitions too. A big trap I got into early on was using like the same 2 or 3. But here we have blur dissolve, we have camera shake, we have glitch, edge wipes, oval irises. They're throughout the entire video. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's move back to the beginning of the video. So as far as all of these shots where it's like gameplay and border and stuff, it's sort of broken into 2 parts. We have this moving ocean background, and this is a still image that I zoomed in on. And when you zoom in on it, you can sort of move it around. So I sort of keyframed it where it starts in one corner of the screen, then moves up to another corner, and then moves back. So if you ever pay attention to the ocean background, you'll see all it does is it just sort of it just moves back and forth, up and down. And it kind of creates the illusion that it's a video, but it's not. It's just an image moving back and forth. And then the border effect, I had originally in some of the earlier videos handmade these, but I figured out there's an effect in DaVinci Resolve called video collage, where you can put things in little tiles like this. So yeah, I'll show you the settings. We got one tile. This is the shape and rounding. And then all the animations that you see, whether it's moving, zooming in, all that sort of stuff, is usually in resize content here, and then keyframing. Tile styling. And then there's like a little drop shadow right here, just around the edges. Again, helps it stand out from the background. And then you can even add some fly and shrinking and fades and all that sort of stuff. So what I did essentially on the Pokemon video, and part of the reason it took so damn long, was I made a bunch of these little animations. Zoom in, zoom outs, moving left, moving right, up and down, whatever. You can see an example of it here. So this is 2 animations, right? You have this one moving to the right, going out, and this one moving to the right, going in. So what I did was I made a bunch of these for the Pokemon video and then threw them into this power bin. So I have a bunch of these that I can use for the video. Primarily just the zoom in and zoom out. I have one that has no animation at all. And a lot of these sort of other ones. And I redid all the animations in 4x3 just in case I cover a 4x3 game in the future. But having them in this power bin means I can just sort of drag them in and out. So let's just do one, for example. So this is the regular one with no animation at all. So if I remove attributes, get rid of all this. This is what I normally would have. So I take this, copy, and then paste attributes, and now it has the border. You know, whatever. Pretty simple. Let's talk a little bit about audio, because there's not too much to say. But a big part of this video was making a soundtrack, essentially. So back in the day, when I made videos of a certain length, like let's say, I don't know, 9 minutes long, typically what you would do is you take like one track and you stretch it out all the way over, and then you bring down the dB, and that's it. But I found that makes for a very boring video where everything feels the same. So the goal with this, despite all the work it took, and I don't know if I entirely succeeded, was to create a soundtrack of a bunch of different songs that could all be used to emphasize what's happening on screen. So we have Floral Fury, which kind of creates this exciting intro. Then I'm talking about Charms. So we have Elder Kettle. Inkwell Isle 1 is used when I'm talking about weapons. When I mention the DLC, we have the Far Off Isle theme. And then this was a fun one. So, the first boss that I talk about how to beat is Cagney Carnation, which is a bit of a uh-oh because I already used Cagney's theme. So what am I going to do, right? Well, luckily, because I saved the music to the end, I realized I ended the DLC section with this footage of Hildeberg, Threaten and Zeppelin. So we have it here, we have it here, and then we have it here with Cuphead. So what that made for was a great excuse to use Hildeberg's theme, Threaten and Zeppelin, to cover this section and then to finish the Cagney fight. So it ended up working out okay to where it didn't feel like it was too much of a distraction. But for the rest of these bosses, I tried to use their theme. So for Grim Matchstick, we have Fiery Frolic. For the robot, Junkyard Jive. Inkwell Hell was used for the mid-boss gauntlet. And then One Hell of a Time was used for both King Dice and the Devil. Just because it's kind of a very fast-paced theme. You know, it's very climactic, which works for this point in the video because the timer's going down, right? And we know I'm about to run out of time here, so I just sort of used it for both fights to create that energy. And then when the release happens and it's like, oh, we finished, wow, okay, then it's the victory theme that plays. And as far as the audio leveling is concerned, if I'm not talking like at all and it's just music playing, minus 15 dB or minus 10 is about where you want it. But when I start talking, typically that's when I have it lowered down to about minus 35. And that's where most of these tracks are. That's why you can't even see the waveforms because they're all at minus 35 for the majority of it. And I found that's a pretty good volume for like most tracks. But obviously, you know, it depends song to song. So yeah, they sort of all fade out and fade in with just some simple audio keyframes. You know, you place a point or you want it to start going quieter, and then you put at the point when you want it to be quiet, and you make these little keyframes, and it does most of that for you. So yeah, bit of a pain in the ass to find all the tracks and to get them to stop where you want them to, which is why I recommend saving it for the end. But a well worthwhile step, I think, for just adding a bit of a mood, a bit of a flair to your video. All right, moving on. Let's see. Let's get back over here because this is a cool effect I want to talk about. Again, in the first minute of a video, you kind of want to go a little ham. I typically am of the philosophy of like simple, laid back editing. The one time I break that rule is in the first minute because you want to keep people entertained. So I figured I'd do like a cool little effect here. And this was partially because I did not have a lot of footage of like the smoke bomb in the description, right? So when I bought it, when I was playing the game, you know, you have just this little bit of footage and it's gone, right? So we're talking what, just like a couple of seconds where it has smoke bomb on the screen. And I'm like, well, that can't do, right? That's unsatisfying. So let's create a bit of an effect here where it zooms in. Then you have green screen footage of a cloud that pops up, which is pretty cool. This footage has a little Gaussian blur that makes everything blurry while the smoke cloud is coming up. And then here, it has the text, and I put it behind the smoke cloud at the start, but then it kind of goes through it right here. So it looks like it's coming out of the smoke. And then the footage gets gray because the smoke is filling up the scene, right? And then finally, as the last little touch, you add the little smoke bomb for the O. That's just cute. It's just a cute little thing. Uh, a lot of these effects like that is just like finding green screen footage to match and then changing the environment to match the effect. You know, a little bit of audio design too, like finding sound effects for stuff is pretty key. But that was a fun effect to do. Most of this video, believe it or not, for like 90% of it, did not have humor in it at all. And it was only thanks to Zach, who had suggested a good bit of these jokes, that I made it as funny as it was, you know? Because my intention was just to make like a little how-to guide, you know, keep it simple. But when I was watching it back, you know, it was very similar, very samey, very same energy, same tone. And Zach was mentioning how humor can often be this sort of pattern interrupt that sort of catches the viewer off guard enough to like pay a little bit more attention. So a lot of the jokes in this video don't really stop the video in its tracks to like, and here's the funny bit, 90% of them are just visual gags, little subtle visual gags. So here I'm like, here's 2 weapons that'll help you get 90% through the game. And then I revealed that it's in fact Moonshine and Jack Daniels, but only for a couple of seconds. I don't even know if like everybody caught that, right? Like it's only there for like a little bit and then we move on to the next shot. And then the little Tom and Jerry bit that you might have saw on Twitter. But the way this one works essentially is you have a swoosh sound effect that sort of acts as a transition. There's no like visual transition here. It's all audio, you know, so there's nothing there. Then I keyframe in text that says replay that goes onto the screen. And then as far as this footage is concerned, it's zoomed in. I have a effect by Patrick Sterling color corrector that cranked down the saturation. And then I think I slowed down the footage. Yeah, it's like 30%. Like there's very few frames here. Because this like moment lasts a couple of seconds. You can actually see it like right here. Like that's it. That's the Tom and Jerry bit right there. You see it before I actually show it. And then here it's just zoomed in. The little Cuphead sound effect where it hits matches perfectly with this Tom and Jerry slap sound effect. And then the scream, all I'm doing here is that it gets a little louder. And then I have a smooth cut transition to bring back the color. And then it's a effect here called screen pump, which is used for like music video stuff. But I cranked the BPM and the effect intensity to make Cuphead look like he's going absolutely ballistic. And this one's actually just an image. You know, the effect is doing 90% of the work, but this is really just an image. So the other bit of editing that I did outside of comedic stuff was trying to emphasize these sort of tips that I'm giving throughout the video. And so this is one of my favorites where I'm talking about like, hey, if you parry the pink bullets, you don't have to deal with this stupid and vulnerable enemy. But like Cagney Carnation, the fight, there's a lot going on, right? You might not even notice the little orange dude right here, this little invulnerable enemy. When you're playing the game, you very much notice him because he's a pain in the ass. But if you're like a casual viewer, you're probably not going to even notice him that much. So this ended up being one of my favorite effects in the video. So you have this sort of like effect here where it goes bright. Then again, you know, saturation on a lower layer to make all of this grayed out. The top layer has this line where this enemy flies back and forth. So you're focused on him. And then add just a little bit more emphasis. This is a newer Patrick Sterling preset, but another good one called Magnify. And it creates this little circle where it zooms in on him. And then the only thing I had to do was keyframe in the position so it follows this guy. Thankfully, all he does is go back and forth, so it wasn't too hard. But see, we're placing emphasis on what I'm talking about visually, right? Like, I could have just shown a shot of me fighting this dude and be like, so you can avoid the invulnerable enemy, but you might not have known what I was talking about. This visually communicates what I want you to know, you know? 2 more things, and then we're done. I promise. I don't want these to go too terribly long. This right here might have been the most complex visual effect I did for the entire video, and it's not even funny. It was just a cool shot I had in mind. So we're talking about the gauntlet, and I'm mentioning which fights are the easiest, right? Like, which ones should you do, which ones should you avoid? So I have this footage of me fighting this horse guy, you know, and what happens is you see this like tree going here. Well, by the time it passes through, the footage is blurred. So we kind of use the tree as a bit of an opportunity to blur it without anybody noticing. And then when it's blurred, I show off the what I consider the 4 easiest mid bosses. And the transitions, again, by Patrick Sterling. You might want to go check him out if you're into DaVinci Resolve stuff. He has a lot of effects. Who would have thought? This is from his 3D transitions pack. And they're all the 3D boxed down. So they start off at the top of the screen and kind of flip in, which is pretty cool. And there's a good bit of like motion blur to sort of sell the effect. And then sort of what I had to do here is I stacked all 4 of these on top of each other and then cropped them out so you only see the middle of each boss. And then just through like layering and positioning things correctly, you get this pretty cool effect where there's not a seam in sight, you know? They all kind of just line up pretty perfectly with each other. And then from there, like, how do we get out of a shot like this, right? And I figured, okay, well, we'll take this domino guy who's sort of in the middle of the screen and bring him back a little bit. So you see he's like, he's part of it here. All 4 of these fight. But then I remove the crop through a keyframe, and then he comes back into screen. Then we go to the next fight, and then it's simple, just like that. All right, last thing. I want to talk about the timer and how I was able to do that. So every time I'm on camera, you'll notice there's a bit of a timer because I say at the beginning of the video, I'm going to tell you how to beat Cuphead in 10 minutes. This was not initially what it was going to look like, you know? Initially, what I was going to do was I was going to have a bar at the bottom of the screen, like right here, that would slowly, like, count down, you know? The problem with that is that having a white bar on scenes like this, where it's just a border in gameplay, that white bar would sort of clash with this white border here. You wouldn't be able to see it. Then I thought, okay, well, let's do the timer, right? Let's do like a little bit of a timer and then just throw it throughout the majority of the video. Again, same problem. Even when it's small and in this corner, it's going to clash with this border and not look nice. It looks good in the full screen sections, but not in sections like this. So the sort of solution, the compromise that I came to was the timer would only show up when I'm on camera. So like those transitions we were talking about earlier, if you'll notice on the bottom right of the screen, as we sort of go through the transition, the timer sort of comes into focus there and it starts playing. And then it immediately gets cut off the second we go into the next point. And really, like, it ended up being a pretty good solution. You can see all right up here, these are where all the timers are at. But in terms of like keeping it all synced up, because I wasn't showing it throughout the whole video, I had to essentially edit everything, start with the first timer right here, drag it all the way up to the top and then stretch it out and then cut out the empty gaps. That way you only see the timer when I need you to. And I I had to do that so many times because I would change things about the video. And I'd be like, I don't like that line. Or, oh, I should add a comedic bit in there. And that would change how many seconds it took to get to the end of this point, you know? Like, originally when I was editing this was like a 10-minute video. But then it got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And then it got a little longer when I started adding the bits. And so I had no idea the final time would end up being like 9:37. So these timers had to change so many different times. And again, one final shout out to how I got that done. This is another preset by the man, the myth, the legend, Patrick Sterling. It's Master Countdown. That's the one I use. And then I just added a little bit of a drop shadow there and changed it to the Cuphead font, which is something I recommend. If you're ever talking about a video game and you have to put text on the screen, try to like match the font. So this one ended up being Allegra Sands. But you can look up any game online and it'll practically tell you the font they use for the title. So it can be pretty handy. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully you found this useful. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what you want me to talk about in the next breakdown. That way it can be a bit more helpful and specific, because there's a lot of things I wasn't able to get to, but I wanted to keep this relatively short. So yeah, I've been Aiden of Blue Couch Productions, and thank you for watching this video. Bye-bye.